Hi, and welcome to Swish 21, Hudl's virtual basketball coaches conference. My name is Chris Leisure. I'm a senior account executive at Hudl. In that role, I manage the Hudl and sports code accounts of our NBA, WNBA, and G League clients. My absolute pleasure to introduce Swish 21 participants to Courtney Banghart, head women's basketball coach at the University of North Carolina. In addition to Courtney's incredible coaching success, which you'll learn about later, she's one of the most dynamic and thoughtful leaders I've encountered in being involved with the sport for 25 years. And I know this firsthand from having worked with Courtney at Dartmouth and for Courtney at North Carolina. Court, welcome, first of all.
So awesome to see you, even though it's this virtual thing.
Right. Well, it's difficult to know, Coach, where to begin an introduction, honestly. 7 Ivy titles in 12 years as the head coach at Princeton. 2 Ivy titles in 4 years as an assistant coach at Dartmouth, 2 Ivy titles in 4 years as a player at Dartmouth, 2-time All-Ivy player, 2015 Naismith National Coach of the Year, recognized in 2015 by Fortune magazine as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders.
Oh,
in just your second year at North Carolina, guided them back to the NCAA tournament, a current group of first-year players that was ranked as the second-ranked recruiting class in the country. And what most people don't know probably is 12 state titles as a high school athlete during your time at Souhegan High in the great Granite State of New Hampshire. In any event, successful by every measure as an athlete and coach. And I'm thrilled that our audience will have the opportunity to gain insight into your winning formula for success through a presentation titled Competitive Leadership, Make One Good Decision at a Time. On behalf of really everyone at Hudl, Court, thank you so much for taking time to present to basketball coaches across the globe and for your tremendous support of Hudl and Hudl Sports Code.
well, I appreciate that. As you know, I couldn't live without sports code and Hudl. I'm on it every day, as you know. So I love that you introduce yourself as Chris, because I think everybody really knows you as Beamer, and most know you as kind of one of the greatest guys ever. Just keep killing the game of friendship and of parenthood and of life, because you do it all the very best. To all the Hudl people, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to giving back and sharing with. I'm going to be tuned in the rest of the day as well to learn from many of the other people that are on a similar journey and doing it their way. And for everybody who's on, when I had been offered opportunity to share, I said yes right away. That was one good decision that I made, right? Say yes, it's virtual, no travel. And I can have notes. This sounds like it's something I could do. But with that comes what we've all learned in the coaching game, is this kind of disconnected communication a little bit, where it feels sometimes like I'm talking at rather than with my people, which is not really my most dynamic or effective way to communicate. And you'd think after all of these recruiting Zooms, I'd be better at it. But nope, that's not the case. So my hope is that I'm going to give you my very best, and that there's some takeaways that you can take from that. Like you said, I would love to talk today about competitive leadership and what's not often talked about, which is the opportunity we have to make good decisions one at a time. As most on the call know, or on this opportunity know, that coaching is the very ultimate people business. We work with people, we lead people, we recruit people, we play against people. And in reality, the basketball part of our job is about 10% of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Coaching is truly all about leadership. It's commonly said that leadership is about getting the whole to be better than the sum of its parts, right? You've heard that before. But for me, true leadership goes a step further, about instead just never letting the pieces get lost in the whole, right? Like an engine is made of so many pieces, and each piece is really critical to making that thing work. Yet as coaches, we often feel comfortable putting players in their roles. You're either a starter, you're a reserve, you're a guard, you're a rebounder, you're a passer, you're a shooter. And I just really stay away from, as much as I can, the opportunity to put people in their roles. And instead I really dial into the successes and growth steps of each of our players. I'm really fully invested in the unique and individual process that makes our players tick. What do they put the work in? Do they see the results? Are they feeling a part of the engine? How do they feel about the locker room culture? And are they contributing to it? So coaching is about inspiring and mentoring, but as not often discussed, it's about making a lot of hard decisions, having real and hard and sometimes really hard conversations along the way. We're responsible to manage the game, manage the day, manage the locker room, and managing your staff. And survival in doing all of that is save for those that know, revisit and lock into their why, which for me is making an impact and leaving a legacy, one person at a time. There's not one personality type that kills this game, right? But there are some absolutes, and that is that coaches have to be competitive. We have to be, right? You win or you get fired. You lead well or you lose your locker room. You care or your people don't, right? And so all leaders have to be both cheerleaders and challengers every day. Let me repeat, all leaders have to be both cheerleaders and challengers every day. My journey as Chris or Beamer talked about, it was different. I was born an athlete, but I became a leader. Really by living it, by reading about it, by talking about it, by talking through it, and by making one decision at a time. I'm a bit of an anomaly, right? I'm an All-American soccer player that coaches college basketball. I'm an Ivy Leaguer who paid for my education in a sport at the Division I level that very few pay to go to school. I have a neuroscience undergraduate degree and a master's degree in writing, but yet I'm coaching basketball. But as I said, leaders have to make a lot of decisions, and for me, it started with following my heart. And a quick spoiler alert for all of us here is that don't let your head make all your decisions. I chose Dartmouth, which is where I played, because according to my father, sports were not a vocation. I chose to play soccer originally at Dartmouth for Steve Swanson, but then he took the Stanford job, and so I had a couple choices. I could go to Stanford with him. I could stay on at Dartmouth to be a soccer player, or I can call the basketball coach. And I called the basketball coach. And there started my career in college basketball. After graduation, I worked at Episcopal High School as a teacher, a coach, and a girls athletic director for, I think it was 3 years. From there, I returned to Dartmouth to get my master's. And again, I paid for it by being an assistant coach. And 4 years later, in the span of 1 week, I turned 29. I defended my graduate thesis. I found out I was a finalist for the Amazing Race, and I was offered the head coaching job at Princeton. Like all of us, I would hope you had a big decision to make. Amazing Race, you win, you make $1 million. You take the Princeton job and you enter the world of the unknown. Again, sports are not a vocation. So I reached out to a bunch of my peers in the business, and they were worried. They said, as an inexperienced coach, if you're not successful, it's career suicide. We don't get recycled very often on the women for women in our business. And I understood that. But by being 29, I thought, gosh, a 4-year deal. So by 33, I'll either get fired and I have enough time to build some professional equity in something else, or I'd get another contract and off I'd be on my way in the college basketball world. And for me, it was an investment in myself. And it's what we tell our players every day, embody it, invest in yourself. I also tell them to stretch themselves. And so I remember telling my Dartmouth team and telling them just that I'm going to make an investment in myself. And I urge you all to do the same as you continue on your journey. And I ask you to continue to stretch yourself. And for me, honestly, the fear of failure was far less than the fear of regret for missing out on an opportunity. So college basketball it was, and it's been one of my really good decisions, I'd say. We had great success at Princeton, a program that had never been to an NCAA tournament. And then we went to 8 in 12 years as their head coach. We shattered the ceiling of non-scholarship Division I basketball. Fortunately, maiden journeys, as mine was in the college basketball business, didn't come with ceilings. And as I told my team back then, neither does a Courtney Banghart team. There are no ceilings. So then North Carolina called 12 years later. I had said no to many programs because for me, make an impact and leave a legacy. I was doing both of those things. I didn't need to be anywhere else. But there was something about this baby blue that said, I gotta listen. And so for me, it was time for the new chapter, and I was inspired for yet another opportunity. So in both the Princeton chapter and now in Miss Carolina chapter, all I know to do is to dive all in. And so I talk about in both programs, there were sort of 4 pillars that I really needed to attack head on, right? Because again, when you get into these coaching roles, you have so many things that are being thrown at you, and you're looking outward on those social media feeds and everywhere else, and it's easy to think about how far ahead somebody is or how somebody else is doing something. And in order to keep my vision direct, I talk about these 4 pillars. Number 1, you got to find your people. You can't even really start to talk about leadership without the importance of that, finding your people. And in coaching as a head coach, that involves 2 groups, right? One of which is your staff. So I got to work at both institutions about hiring my holes. right? I'm really big picture. I'm okay operating in gray, but I know not everybody is. Some people really operate in the black and white. Some people that I'm going to lead operate really well in the detail-oriented space. And so I made sure that I've got one on my staff always who's very much like that, right? I knew I had to hire people different than me because my team was going to be made up of people different than me. And so the core values needed to be aligned, but in terms of where they're from, their level of experience, the color of their skin, their interests, their personality traits, right? I wanted people that were different so that we could connect with the whole range of people we were going to coach. I didn't know some of the people I hired. I know a lot of people hire people they know all the time. And I think trust is important, loyalty is important, but you can build that, right? And I always enter in interactions starting from a place of trust. I hired people that can be both cheerleaders and challengers, both for me and with me. So that was kind of the first thing. You got to build your staff of people that are going to then hunt your players. And I found my players, which have to fit me, right? They have to fit me, which as a player might be versatility or length or competitiveness, or do they love basketball, right? Whatever it is in terms of, for me, what's important. But they also have to fit one another, right? Not having a team of all people that are leaders or all followers or all play the same position or all see things in a similar way. And in choosing your people, it's a puzzle. And owning that how people fit together in part is how you're starting to build your culture. So I ask a lot of questions in the recruiting process of both staff and players. I trust my gut. And then if you make a mistake, know that that's on you, not them. So you got to develop them, right? That's for players and staff. So first is finding your people. And then two, I just talked about if you either make a mistake or if you don't make a mistake, you must develop them, right? Number two, develop your people. And, our culture is built on that. It's built on buy-in, right? And how do you buy into something when you feel like you're just being carried along, right? Or you feel like what you're doing is a little bit less value than somebody else, whether you're a reserve or a starter, or you're an assistant coach who has more experience or less, right? I don't operate well without a collaborative, cohesive environment, right? That's built on buy-in. And so we talk about what our goals are, which are ultimately the outcome, but we talk in the language of commitments, right? So goals are your outcome. Boy, I want to win an ACC title, or boy, I want to be a head coach someday, right? But commitments are what get you there. And so we talk about things that what's one, for example, we are very clear about asking our players, what's one thing we can count on you for every day this particular season, right? And we ask them to really think about that. Is that I'm going to be vocal? Is that I'm going to come eager to learn? Is that I'm going to listen well? Is that, whatever that's going to be. And then we literally provide it right on a laminated document that will have, this is what we said, the one thing, regardless of how it's going for you, we can count on you for. And we put them in their lockers so that they can hold each other accountable, and most importantly, themselves. And then we also talk about things you're going to give up. That's another level of commitment, right? What are you going to give up? Is that something as simple as candy, right? Is that something as simple as you're trying to, stay fit? You got to make good decisions. Is that, you're going to, stay away from social media after midnight, which will help your sleep habits, right? But it's what are you going to give up and what are you going to do, right? Those commitments that talk about goals. It's developing your people. We also talk about success and growth areas, and I do that same process for players as I do coaches, right? What are you good at, right? What were your successes? If on the player side, or you were on the All ACC freshman team, or you played considerable minutes, or you demonstrated that you shot at a certain percentage, or whatever the successes were, right? And for staff, you won a certain percentage of your scouts, or you were able to be the lead recruiter for a handful of players, whatever the successes are, right? And then we talk directly about the growth areas. So in the year ahead, what are the areas that you independently, we have to be mindful that we want to grow in those areas, right? And we work on those both separately, and then we come together and work on them together. And it's a document we all agree on. And that is page 1 of each of our individual team manuals. So it talks about kind of where we need to be in our journey. Again, do not let the parts get lost in the whole. So, that comes down to staffing, the hard conversations that you have to have in developing your people, right? Like, something as clear as office hours or attire, or something as more gray about the energy they bring every day to practice. If you leave awkward moments in an awkward space, then you as the leader are not communicating properly. You're not developing your group to the next stage. And so we really, We really question, what they're for managing your people. What are their words of affirmation? Is it time spent? Is it task? However we can connect to their growth curve, where they know that they're an integral piece of the machine. And no matter where they fit into the machine, without them, it doesn't go as well. Right. So find your people, develop your people, stay laser focused on those two things. And then the third thing is establishing your culture. Right. And this is a big one, because I think in competitive athletics, there's a lot of assumptions. And one assumption is that people are team oriented. Well, I'm just going to go recruit people that care about team. Right. I bring it back to kind of how we come into the world. Right. We come into the world alone. Even when you're a twin, I have twins, we sort of say you still are your own individual. Right. So you come into the world alone and you leave alone. But as we know, life is about what you do in the middle. Right. So I think as leaders, one of our main jobs in establishing our culture is helping people, showing them what's in it for them to be a part of and to care about the group, right? Whether that's the best players always come from the best teams, whether that's team success means more opportunity for coaches to progress in their careers, right? So we teach people how to compete, we push them to their growth, we dive into their own unique element and their own unique process, but yet we ensure that they understand, that we talk about it, what the sacrifices that need to be made, so that we can understand that the growth of the team is going to actually commit directly to the success of you. There's a great quote out there. I think it was Maya Angelou, but you fact checkers might have something a little different, but that comparison is the thief of joy. Now, I think Maya Angelou says everything proper. So everything good out there came from Maya Angelou or Oprah. But the great quote is that comparison is the thief of joy. And everybody only has so much in their tanks, right? And we have to help our kids understand how to refill theirs. And a lot of times refilling theirs is the wasted space of social media, which is the world of comparison. Really have to stay away from that as best we can to help people think about following on social media, things that flow with their energy, right? And things like that. But helping people learn how to fill their own tanks is another kind of part of that, and have their culture, so that they can, your coaching staff, yourself and your team can be their best for the group. Find your people, develop your people, establish your culture. And lastly is control what you can control. So again, when you take over a program, very few people take over a program that's in a great spot, right? Very few people do that. Oftentimes you are taking over a program that's in need of a change, right? And so there's a lot of work immediately. And when you do that, think about controlling what you can control, right? Finding your people, developing your people, establishing your culture, and lastly, controlling what you can control, right? Infuse your program with you. Have that vision, let people into it. Ask questions, watch the others' actions, point inward all the time. If you want your team to do it, you got to lead with it. So all the losses are your fault. The wins are because you picked the right people, right? Kind of that idea, that quote that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Success is what you work so hard for. It's not who you are. Right? Who you are is what gets you to success, right? Again, controlling what they can control, both your staff and your players, is their best version of themselves is going to lead us to success, right? So I'm competitive and driven, but I thrive in the progress of others. And so I control that with kind of where I put my energy. So those kind of 4 pillars really help me stay focused on the task at hand, stay authentic to what's important to me and how I find success to be. And it allows me to avoid some of the distractions. It also lets me prioritize the decisions that I have to make. Right? I can't make a mistake in my people. I can't make a mistake or to neglect the developing of my people. Right? I can't make a mistake in terms of, or the decisions I have to prioritize have to be about developing our culture and ensuring that it remains in place. And then, of course, understanding that it's never disaster, because all you really can control is what you can control, and that's infusing your program with you. So I'm going to share with you 3 stories that I think can illustrate some leadership and some hard decisions that I had to make, and that will give you a little bit of a lens into how I operated. The first one is the story where I did not meet President Barack Obama. It's a great story. We were 30-0 in 2015, and as an Ivy League alum, playing in the Ivy League and now coaching an Ivy League team, when you go 30-0 and you're 13th in the country, you have to win the NCAA tournament, right? If you've done all of that, you've been kind of the media darling all year, and it comes down to you don't even win in the first round of the NCAA tournament. In some ways, you've actually, I think, decreased the value of the Ivy League. So, man, I needed this win more than we needed oxygen, right? Just from a league standpoint. And we're getting ready to play the game, and the Obama's niece is on my team. So it was the very first time a sitting president was ever at an NCAA women's athletic event. So this was a big deal. And I had just been in the locker room at the University of Maryland and kind of told my team, hey, there's going to be anywhere between 15 and 18,000 fans, but you just kind of stay locked into me, and we're just going to, you always dance with the ones that brought you in life, right? You brought me, I brought you. So we're going to stay locked in. Right. And so about a minute and a half before the game, due to security, couldn't be there any earlier, Barack arrived with his entourage. And he arrives on the opposite corner. So he's arriving kind of behind our benches, and he starts on the side where the opposing coach is. So like any good American, as he walked by the opposing coach's bench, the opposing coach shook his hand, and I'm sure the leader of the free world introduced himself and welcomed him. Right. So I've got about 45 seconds until he's going to be at my bench. I'm sorry, about 10 seconds. So it's going to be at my bench, which is going to be about 40 seconds left on the clock. Right. But typically for basketball teams, about a minute and a half before the end of that clock goes off, your team starts running over to you. Right. And remember, I had just told them lock in. And so in that moment, I had a decision to make. Right. And so fast forward, we win the game. So now we're 31-0. There's a ton of media there. Right. And I get a question. I think it was from Good Morning America. And they asked me, literally the first question, what was it like to meet the president? And my answer was, well, I didn't, but we did win the game. And in that moment, I think teaching our players that, you lead by example, you speak in truths, you lead competitively, right? That in that moment, all I cared about was winning that game. That was most important, and I'm a Barack fan, and communicate well, authentically. And sometimes that involves no words. So my children have met the president. My mother and father who were at the game have met the president. I have yet to meet the president, but because of that, I did get to meet Michelle Obama later on in my career. So that was excellent. So that's the first story. The second story is the time I did meet Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. So this is a hilarious story as well. She came to the next game. So we're 31-0. She's obviously down in the DC area. We're playing at Maryland again. And she sends me an email, like from her actual email account, personal email account, that says, Courtney, I'd love to come to see, she's a Princeton alum. I'd love to come see Princeton play, and with Elena Kagan, another justice. And by the way, I've never been to a Princeton athletic event. So what exactly do I do? So I found a way to articulate what you do when you walk into a basketball game, right? And how you get a ticket and you sit at your seat, right? Try to write that in an email, right? Good luck. Anyway, turns out I arrive about, I come out to the gym after telling my team, lock in again. And I walk out about an hour before the tip while they're doing their warm up and whatnot. And right behind the bench is the two Supreme Court justices waving. So I did meet them. We did not win the game, however. So I get an email from Sotomayor a couple of days after the game, and she says, I've never been prouder to be a Princetonian, right? Your team performed with such class and grit. And I just wanted to commend you all and invite you to the Library of Congress and all that stuff. My takeaway for that when I read that email to my team was that the things that matter, right? There's a great book by Bill Walsh that says the score takes care of itself, right? And it was a chance for me in that moment to help our players understand and our staff understand the score isn't always on the scoreboard, right? Your why of making an impact and leaving a legacy, sometimes that's the score, right? And even in defeat, which was a really hard defeat because your 31-0 season is now over, it showed who we had become in that locker room. So that was kind of the second story. And the last one might be the funniest of all. It was when I had gotten a call from Fortune magazine, Patty Sellers, that had told me that I had been selected as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders, right? Like, let me get that. Let me say that again, because it's actually hilarious. So you get a call, picture your life. You get a call from Patty Sellers from the Fortune magazine, and she tells you have been selected as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders. Well, I thought it was my college friend telling a joke on me, which I assume most people listening in with me right now would think the same, right? That's not really something that's a real life story. So I responded as if it was my college friend, who was hilarious, telling a joke on me. And I have my assistant in the car with me. So she's kind of laughing with me. I mean, we're just having a blast. Fast forward like 15 minutes later. And by the end of the call, she says, Courtney, that's been, the most engaging and hilarious acceptance of any call I've made. I'm wondering if you'll be the speaker at the dinner. I was like, oh no. right? And it goes, of course, the email goes right to my phone. And I'm like, oh my God, that wasn't a joke, right? People on the list is Bill and Melinda Gates and Elon Musk and Taylor Swift and LeBron James and yours truly, the Pope. Yeah, and yours truly. So somehow I end up being the speaker at this dinner, right? And I asked, what in the world should I talk about, right? What should I talk about that can be of value to a bunch of people that have actually done life-changing things in this world? And she said, how about just give some advice? It's like, give some advice, dear Lord. So I ask everybody I know for like the greatest, most inspirational life lessons they've ever been given. And I say this not cliche. What I ended up going back to was why I was listed that, which is arguably ridiculous anyway, but why I had been given that honor. And it was because of the success of my team, right? The engine parts had created such a great whole. And I thought about what makes them different, what made them so successful was who they were and who they helped as teammates, right? So my speech, the advice and the speech that I spoke about was that life is about two things: who you are and who you help. And think about yourself as think about your team, right? Your team, your best player, your reserves, your everybody. Their journey is really about who they are and who they help, right? And so that was a hilarious story. I guess the takeaway on that is if you ever get that phone call, make it funny. Good things happen to funny people. So, in summary, building, maintaining, and living in your program requires consistent leadership, right? Infuse it with you, right? Have a really clear vision on how you're going to choose your people, how you're going to develop them and value them, what your culture is going to be and how you're going to commit to it, and then controlling the controllable, because life and leadership is about who you are and who you help. The biggest challenge that we have on this call or on this Zoom and in this population is that we have a job to make our team better, which means we have to stretch our pieces, right? That's a really uncomfortable process, right? Making people better, pushing them out of their comfort zone is uncomfortable, right? But yet we're rated and judged and valued and retained often by the positive student athlete experience that you provide. So think about that, how different they are. Pushing you to grow, very uncomfortable. Yet we need to have a positive student athlete experience, right? And you're doing it amongst a group of people that hold you to an almost unattainable perfection standard, right? Know that you're getting into that as coaches, that's what you're signing on for. You better not say the wrong thing. You better not make the wrong decision, right? Or you run the risk of losing your locker room or hurting a relationship with either a coach or a player. And I just say, be inspired to meet that obligation, be inspired to meet that standard, and know that in your heart, growth is uncomfortable. But if they know you care, that will provide you, and they're actually growing, will provide you that student athlete experience that's positive, right? And so do what you say, lead with authenticity, communicate with clarity, right? And control what you can control, which is how in which you care about those you lead. I feel like I should liken this back a little bit to the title of competitive leadership. I think we all know how competitive our industry is, right? And how you fill your tank so you can continue to compete at a high level is an individual enterprise, but it's critical, right? Yet the other part of the title was making one good decision at a time. Even when it's hard, remember why you're in this business, right? Is it to have championships and wins on your tombstone? Is it to make an impact or leave a legacy like it is me? Is it to progress through various chapters in your life? Just remembering what your why is will allow you to make sure that your decisions are aligned with that, right? And when you're not sure what to do, or you've made a decision that you're presented with a decision that you just don't know, just dive deeper into it by knowing that failure is never an option, right? Failure is never an option, right? You just find another way. So if you have a team that doesn't shoot it so well, you better play fast, right? If you have a team that doesn't defend very well, you have to defend the ball together, right? It's approaching your opportunity to lead these young people that failure is just not an option, right? And knowing that it's not an option for you either. So because I'm old, I figured I might be able to offer some perspective. I know it's popular to share things like, well, I wish I knew then, or I do know now, or whatnot. So I have a few takeaways that might be useful, because like I said, old people often have a little more perspective. So I'll give you 10. All right. The first one is that being a working parent is hard for everyone, not just for coaches. right? To be great at more than one thing requires grace and patience. So too does leadership, right? The grace and patience that you require, that you need to be successful as a parent and a professional is what your players need because they're student athletes. All right. So leading with grace and patience, and knowing that being a working parent is hard for everybody. Number two, neuroscience to me was fascinating and it was so hard. Every single class was hard. But I was right. Women in the sciences are marketable, even if it's in coaching. No, but honestly, I think following your heart, even when you're not sure where the ends will meet, right? So as you're entering this profession and as you're figuring out how to transverse it, it's knowing that don't worry about where the end line is and will that get me to where I want to go ultimately. It's ensuring that you're following your heart and the end point it will come. Number three, some decisions are hard, but some decisions are easy, but most are hard. And just remain flexible and make one at a time. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing, right? Trust your heart, trust your work, and adjust, right? Sometimes you might need to speed the game up. Sometimes you need to slow it down, even when the original game plan called for the other, right? Or sometimes you have to go to a backup recruit because who you thought you loved, you don't love as much the more you get to know about it, right? So some decisions are easy, most are hard. Embrace that and remain flexible, right? Number four, the game changes rapidly. And so I was so worried when I first got into the business that I had to be really good at everything, right? I had to be able to play fast. I had to be able to play slow. I had to be good at zone. I had to be good at man. I had to have a secondary defense and a third defense and all the things, right? I had to be able to defend ball screens in all ways because you just never know. And I want to show my team how much I know, right? I would say that you'll learn as you go. So will your team. So, not feeling like you have to know it all and be it all right away. Number four, success is about grit. 1000% success is about grit. If it's that important to you to succeed, your work habits are that important to you as well. All right. Number six, things. There are some that work really hard and there are some that work really smart and most just work, right? It's a major advantage to work both hard and smart. So take a step back before you dive in so that you can work both hard and smart. Number seven, discipline is success's greatest separator. So as you think about the people in your life and the ones that are the most successful, can almost guarantee that what makes them different is the level of discipline they have, right? Think about your team, right? The team, those that are most successful probably are the most disciplined. How they spend their time, how they take care of themselves, right? All those things that discipline is required. Number eight, leaders have to constantly lead, right? And so if you can't have bad days, you can't take possessions off. It's really an unattainable standard at times, right? As we talked about. So in order to do that, you have to be really vigilant about filling your tank, right? There's no such thing as I'm just going to gut through it, right? Because if you gut through it, you have a little bit less to give. And so it's a good personal and professional decision to exercise and to read, right? Nobody really loves to exercise, and some people love to read, but it's a good personal and professional decision to do both. So I highly recommend that. Number nine, being a leader is lonely. Being a leader, let me repeat, is lonely if you let it, right? It's lonely on the internal operation. It doesn't need to be lonely externally. And what I mean by that is seek counsel and connect with people outside of your industry. Leaders across all levels and across all the disciplines have similar challenges. They just have a little bit of a different slant to it. And so I have found that one of my saving graces through the hardest of hard and the darkest of days and the loneliness of moments has been the people that aren't on my journey on the inside. They're on a similar journey on the outside and being able to cross-reference and cross-breed that. And lastly, competitive leadership, which is otherwise known as coaching, is really good for my soul. And I obviously hope it's really good for yours as well. So you're going to hear from so many speakers throughout the next 2 days. And so will I, because learning from one another is partly what makes us go. But I hope from me, you took a few takeaways that both whether you're developing or maintaining your program in terms of your people, in terms of developing your people, in terms of establishing your culture, in terms of controlling what you can control, and then thinking about all your own personal stories, right? Thinking about those things that you live, that have become now stories in your background, and in your past, and how they connected to what you want to be as a leader. And knowing that along the way, there's going to be lots of decisions that you have to make, right? Some are as simple as, should we do our shoot around today or should we not? Some are going to be as hard as, which candidate would fit our needs in this moment, even though both can help us, right? And knowing that some of the decisions are easy, most are hard. We own that as our leaders. And when you make the wrong one, failure is not an option. So you develop your way through it, and you trust your heart and trust your work. So you'll be able to get, I know there's questions and things in the chat, you'll be able to get a hold of me. The good thing about college coaches is we're very accessible. Our contact information is sort of littered all over the world. And so I can promise you that this is supposed to be a dialogue, and had we all been in person, it would be a much easier dialogue. But in this moment, in this virtual space, I certainly appreciate your attention and your time, and I look forward to our continued dialogue moving forward. So Swish and Hudl, keep creating great products, because we can't do what we do without you guys doing what you do. Many thanks.